So I'll call to order the Village Utility Commission for Wednesday, August 13th, 2025 at 5 p.m. The quorum is here and the agenda was properly posted?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Public appearances? Okay, anybody out there in the Ethernet? Okay, seeing none. Number 4, discuss and consider the minutes of the Utility Commission meeting of July 9th, 2025. Can I have a motion to approve, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
And I'll second it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And no abstaining. Thank you. Discuss and consider approval of the vouchers. I'll make a motion to approve the vouchers as posted. Can I have a second, please?
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And no one abstaining. Now to unfinished business. Number 8, discuss and consider, discuss the farm interceptor project.
I have great news, ladies and gentlemen. We have managed to come on who would have ever thought we'd have two developers that are two different timelines to come to the table and get a interceptor project to where we're at today. It's been a feat. On that update, Strand is at 90% for their drawing, so that's what's included in the packet today. Pretty straightforward, same design that they showed previously. The easement has been relocated from our original easement in the southern portion of it where the Tierneys own the land, the farm. And we'll be putting the interceptor through their alignment to help set them up in the future for their future development. We've worked together very closely, Strand and the Tierney's engineer have worked very closely together. So with that, I'm looking from this committee, previously discussed is that we would come with a developer's agreement signed from one of the developers before going out to bid. We have come to preliminary agreements with both developers for a total of between $400,000 and $500,000 of contributions between the two of them to go towards this project. So I'm asking for staff direction from you guys to move forward with this project. We have a couple permits that we have to do, but to get it out to bid as soon as possible, and the knowledge that we would not award the project until one of the agreements is signed, with the hope that this happens within the next month. The total construction cost that Strand has estimated with a 20% contingency right now is just at about $1.7 million.
Why wouldn't we have both people come to the conclusion that they're going to progress?
They have
the developer's agreement.
Yep. So we are in the works of drafting both of them. We just don't have the signatures. And
Okay.
so if we continue, what I'm afraid of is that if we wait until both are signed in September and we wait to bid until September, that's pushing us out another 3 to 4 weeks for construction. And if we are able to start construction in that early October timeframe, we can kind of hopefully get it in before the frost.
Well, that's understandable. I just am concerned with only one of them signing it, and then the other one is out there in limbo.
Ideally, we would have both signed.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Sounds good. And you need a motion to proceed, or just?
Just staff direction from you guys, if that works.
Okay.
And primarily why we're asking for the flexibility is because one portion of the project may have to actually go to Village Board and Utility Commission. So just based off of scheduled meetings, we don't want to lock in.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. Discussion, anyone? Okay, then I would say it's unanimous to move forward.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Okay. And number 7, new business. Discuss and consider water and sewer long-range cash flow and rate analysis plan.
So just to tee up this project for John while he's getting ready. So we did the sewer analysis last year, which had in general pretty good feedback from the commission. With that kind of feedback, bringing forward to have both water and sewer on an annual basis kind of presented at where are we looking, kind of similar to what the village board does from a financial management perspective. So John's here to kind of paint a worst case scenario. Just as a reminder, anything that has to go for a water rate increase, we can estimate what that cost recovery is, but ultimately the PSC has to agree that this is what our costs would actually be and what they're going to allow. So this is just based off of, again, in my picture, a worst case scenario. We had a budget preview with Madison Metropolitan Sewer District this morning. I reached out for some clarification. I had an 8% escalator year over year on the charges from them based off of some previous estimates. The new director has alluded that that's probably aggressive. Next year is probably closer to going to be 4.9%. So ultimately, when we bring the budget back to this commission next meeting, the final increase recommendation may be lower than what's here. This is just to paint, again, a worst case scenario based off of what the project load is. As I'm sure, as you've been reviewing the packet, one project, I guess just putting some overall context on why water specifically kind of looks a little bit out of whack. I do want to remind kind of the commission, there hasn't been any significant utility financed water projects since 2016, which would have been Tower 3, I believe. So typically what we saw in the last increase was catching up from not doing a rate case study since 2018. So really a lot of, and John will kind of touch on this, what we're seeing is the investment required to bring well 2 up to compliance, as well as to provide some redundancy in the looping is what is initially presented. But again, we'll have to go in front of PSC for approval. So with that, John, thanks for coming today.
Yeah. Okay.
Take it over to you.
Okay. All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me here this evening. As Cameron said, I'll walk through kind of what I think you could consider your worst case scenario, but I promise to do so in a cheery manner, so it'll just sound better as we go through it. So if you go to the next page, in terms of just why we're here and really what the purpose of an analysis like this is for both water and sewer is, as you're contemplating capital investments, looking at really an initial plan of finance for those capital improvements, and then testing that plan of finance against really the revenues of the utility and what ultimately is going to need to happen with user rate revenues to be able to support those capital improvement projects over, in this case, a 10-year period of time. The other thing that we take a look at with both water and sewer is, as we go through an analysis like this, recognizing that both utilities are enterprise funds of the village, meaning that they operate a little bit more like a business and that the revenues coming in and are needing to meet the revenue requirements for both utilities, so that truly the recommendations that you're seeing put both utilities or keep both utilities in a very self-sufficient manner. Both utilities, as we went through sewer last year, now doing water and sewer this year, and I know you went through a water rate case recently, both utilities are in good position, want to keep it that way. So as we look at things, we'll talk just briefly for both utilities about historical performance. We'll look at the future from a capital standpoint, and then talk about long-range cash flows for both items, both water and sewer, and then what does that mean if those rate increases do move forward over time in terms of the impact to the average residential customer. So we go to the next page. So as we start to dive in and we talk about the revenue requirements for the utilities, one of the kind of first high-level topics to talk about is when we talk about how much revenue should we generate from our user rates, that really is defining the revenue requirement for each utility. There's really 2 ways to go about defining the revenue requirement for a utility. There's a cash-based method and a utility-based method. Both methods, as you look kind of side by side, want to make sure that your user rates are recovering 100% of your annual operating and maintenance expenses. Both methods want to make sure that your user rates are recovering 100% of any taxes. In the case of the water utility, the payment in lieu of taxes. Where they start to differ in terms of methodology is on the capital side. Cash-based method is really just looking at cash coming in versus cash going out. So on the capital side, really wanting to ensure that the user rates are sufficient to meet all principal and interest payments for the utility rates portion of any debt service payment. Any cash-funded annual capital expenses that come about on a routine basis that you would want to make sure you're generating revenues from user rates to recover. And then that revenue requirement is offset by any non-rate revenue. So interest income, late fees, tower rental income, anything like that comes into the utility that helps offset the amount of money we need to generate from our user rates. On the utility-based method, and really where this comes into play is more on the water side. So this is, as you go in for a conventional rate case, this is how the Public Service Commission would be viewing the revenue requirements for the utility. So on the capital side, you're wanting to make sure that the utility is recovering 100% of your annual depreciation expense. And on the water side specifically, that's depreciation on utility financed assets and service as opposed to assets that might have been dedicated to the utility or contributed to the utility over time. And then wanting to make sure that you're earning a positive rate of return within the utility. So at a high level, depreciation recovers the principal of the assets that you have in the ground over their lifespan. So each asset has a set depreciation rate based on its lifespan, so we're recovering that principal over time. Rate of return at a high level recovers the interest expense on the assets over time. And in the absence of debt and interest expense, rate of return is a quick measurement of a utility's financial health and signalization of an ability to reinvest in itself within the existing revenue stream that you have. Okay, so right now, if you were to go in for a conventional rate case, the benchmark rate of return is just under 6.5%. I know when the utility went in for its rate case not too long ago, that rate of return was also at about 6.5%. So things haven't really changed too much, but that rate of return, PSC establishes a benchmark rate of return really based on where interest rates are. So if you go back in time a few years ago to when we had historically low interest rates, we had a floor rate of return at the state level of 4.9%. And the historic norm is about where we are now, about 6.5%, somewhere in there. So both methods are perfectly acceptable for evaluating the financial health of the utility. But when we look at water as opposed to sewer, we're needing to make sure that we're looking at both because we have to live within the confines of the Public Service Commission. So when you go in to increase your rates, you're having to do so through either a conventional rate case process, which is anything more than an inflationary increase. PSC also has what's called a simplified increase process, which is inflationary in nature. Right now, that rate increase is 3%. So if you look at the next page, and we kind of switch gears and start looking now specifically at the water utility, and we go back in time to 2020 and out through budget year 2025. This shows the revenue requirements of the utility graphically, cash basis on the top, utility basis on the bottom. On a cash-based method, so we look from left to right, the orange bars going across the page represent the annual operating and maintenance expenses of the water utility as well as the payment in lieu of taxes. The tan bar is the annual principal and interest payments for the water utility on an annual basis going from 2020 out through 2025. The green bar, where it appears in specific years, is any cash-funded capital expenses that would have occurred within the water utility. And then you've got two lines that run across the page, a purple line and a blue line. The purple line is the revenue requirement of the utility, and you'll see in a lot of years it's slightly less than the top of the accumulation of all of the bars, and that again is just because you've got some non-user rate revenue that comes in to help offset the revenue requirement. The blue line going across the page is the actual amount of revenue you take in or have taken in from user rates. So what you see going, starting in 2020 out through 2023 is that your blue line has been either at, in the case of 2021, or in the case of really the other years leading up to 2024, below our purple revenue requirement line. So what we want to see on a cash-based method is that blue line, with the exception of one-time cash-funded capital expenses, like 2022 was a heavy year, 2020 was a heavy year, might be having a purposeful drawdown of reserves in those years. But in general, what we want to see is that the blue line is above or at or above our purple line, and you can see that coming up in 2024 and 2025 as your new rates took effect. When we look at things on a utility-based method, and again, that really is extremely important for us to look at because it's the way that the Public Service Commission will evaluate the health of the water utility. Same operating and maintenance expenses and pilot payment going across the page on an annual basis. But then on the capital side, the tan bars represent the annual depreciation expense on utility financed assets and service, and the green bar represents the benchmark rate of return in those particular years from 2020 out through budget year 2025. Again, our purple line is our revenue requirement, and our blue line is our user rate revenues on an annual basis. And you can see that we've been below the revenue requirement out through really 2024, where we're really meeting that revenue requirement. Again, telling you or providing you a signal that the rate increase that you did is fully meeting the revenue requirement of the water utility as it was established by the Public Service Commission as you went through your rate case process. And as we look into really the current year, we're now slightly deviating. So this is a really good time to be looking at this, and kudos to you all for doing a long-range analysis like this, because it allows proactive conversations to say, listen, you're really at kind of a break-even or just slightly trending below break-even status, so it's time to think about taking action, and we'll talk about that here next. If you look at the next page, a couple other financial indicators that we want to pay attention to as we're starting to think about the future is just where your reserves are, and then just that operating ratio in terms of your user rates, being able to recover 100% of your operating and maintenance expenses, as well as your annual depreciation expense. So one of the biggest questions that we get asked when we start to look at a long-range capital plan for a utility is, how much cash should we have on hand, and when is it appropriate to start using cash to help pay for some of the capital improvement projects in the utility? So one of the metrics that we've looked at, we've got a number of them that are listed in the actual detailed packet, but one of the, I guess, the overarching ones is 6 months of operating expenses and 1 year's worth of debt service payment as a minimum benchmark target to have in reserves at all times. And the way to kind of simplify this and think about it is, if something catastrophic happened where you were unable to collect utility revenue for a period of time, at a minimum you've got 6 months of operating expenses in the bank. You also have your next year's debt service payment in the bank and covered for. And I think, if you think about, well, what would possibly happen that would be that catastrophic? One of the things in today's environment, unfortunately, is a cyber attack where you wouldn't be able to access your utility billing system for a period of time. You wouldn't be able to bill your residents and your customers. We've got to make sure that we've got at least 6 months, 1 year's worth of debt, allows Cam to sleep well at night. And anything above that line, we're talking about maybe being able to deploy some cash. When we're below that line, we're talking about debt financing our capital improvement projects. And you look at the top bar chart, the bars going across the page represent that 6 months target and 1 year's worth of debt. The actual line going across it is the ending cash balance for each year. So going into 2024 is really the first time where you're cracking above that line here. So again, telling you that the rate increase that you did is having a positive impact on the utility. From an operating ratio standpoint, you're really at or just slightly below in 2023, and then came above it in 2024, recovering 100% of your operating and maintenance expenses and depreciation expense. As we look now to the future and go to the next page, thank you. The water utility out through from 2025 through 2035 has approximately 17,591,000 of capital improvement projects that are identified in the plan. From a financing plan standpoint, it breaks down to about 16.5 million of those projects being debt financed through the issuance of general obligation debt and then supported with the revenues of the water utility, and a little over $1 million being funded through cash, and that's predominantly for more routine capital projects that are occurring annually. At the bottom of the page are projects that are being tracked in the context of your capital improvement plan, but they're not part of the analysis because you have other sources of revenue to be able to support them. Those predominantly are impact fee related projects or projects that are specifically identified as assignable to developer as part of a new development project. If we look at the next page and start to kind of bring it all together for the water utility and look at the cash flow analysis from 2025 out through 2034, there's a number of lines here, and I'll just kind of walk through things at a high level. We've got our total revenues from user rates at the very top line. Below that, we start to show what are the percentage increases, as Cam mentioned early on, from a worst-case scenario that as you're adding capital, and if we're assuming in this case a 3% year-over-year increase to your operating and maintenance expenses, what is the percentage increase that keeps you really right at a PSC benchmark level of about 6.2%, so a little bit lower than where benchmark is right now, but again, that's more a historic norm over a 10-year period of time. Below that section of lines is our other revenues coming into the utility, predominantly late fees and other miscellaneous revenues. And then we start to get into our expenses. We've got our operating and maintenance expenses, our pilot payments, or our payment in lieu of taxes from the water utility to the general fund. We then have our debt service, our existing debt, and then the new debt from the capital improvement plan that starts to get layered in. So if we're issuing debt, for example, first year in 2026, 2025 debt is already included in the existing debt. The first year of future principal and interest payments would be in 2027. We then have our capital improvement projects, and then on the revenue side, any debt proceeds that are offsetting those capital improvement projects. And the culmination of our total revenues minus our total expenses is our net annual cash flow. And then we're showing just an estimate of restricted and unrestricted reserve levels over time. So to bring your attention back to the top of the page, really what we're showing, or the analysis is showing that is needing to happen, is a 22.5% increase that could take effect as soon as next year, sometime next year in 2026. And if you've been on this board for a period of time, you went through the last rate case, you likely would know that it takes a good amount of time to get through a conventional rate case. At the short end, minimum of, say, 6 months. On the longer end, 9 months to even upwards of a year. Given that you were in for a rate case not too long ago, I would probably guesstimate you more at the 6-month mark, just because you would think that the PSC would have less questions than they might otherwise, just because it's not been too long since you were in for a rate case last. The next time you'd be looking at a rate case would be in 2028 at about 21.5%. And then in 2030 at 7.5%, 2032 at 6.5%, and 2034 at 9.75%. So one of the things you might be thinking of, why do we show a rate increase every other year? Again, we're allowing for that time that we know it's going to take for a rate increase to take effect to happen. So to think that you're going to be able to do one year over year in the confines of the PSC's regulatory system and environment is likely not practical. The other thing I would say is, while we're showing that rate increase taking effect at the beginning of 2026, you obviously aren't in the middle of preparing for a rate case. I think it's likely that you could potentially start in spring of next year, really around the same time that you're finalizing your annual report for 2025, with the goal of having those new rates take effect by the end of 2026, so that they're in place for the new debt that would be starting principal and interest payments in 2027. The next page just shows the future rate of return. So again, as we're working through this analysis, we're kind of having these worksheets side by side where we're showing rate increases and then testing that against the PSC's framework for measuring benchmark rate of return, which again is a percentage of our net operating income on an annual basis as compared to our undepreciated assets and service. Switching gears to the sanitary sewer side.
John, I'm gonna stop.
Yeah.
Just real quick on water. When we're estimating projects and other things, there's relatively large contingencies and inflationary factors that have been built into this model. So when we go through that rate case study, we have to recapture our actual costs. So typically what happens is projects conclude, and then revenue requirement is determined the year that we would submit the study. So in this example, we would use 2026 revenue requirement year. We would only be able to adjust our rates to for the cost of the 2026 revenues required. What that likely means is, because of how long well 2 is probably gonna take, along with what's the other project? The looping. That those 100% of the effect of that may not be 100% captured by that rate case. So in a perfect world, if all of our eggs happen, I highly doubt we have rates in place earlier than January 1, 2027, maybe fourth quarter 2026, even if we pull for a rate case study in April of 2026. So this is just, again, to paint that picture of if all the projects that were scheduled to be done in 2026 actually finished in 26 with pulling debt on a very specific date, what that effect would be.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a good point, because the PSC will look at, when you go in for a rate case, they will look at the year those assets are actually getting booked into service. So if you're, say, even taking the debt out in 2026, but you know that the asset is not going to actually get finished and booked into service until 2027, we'd want to work with staff to time out when it's appropriate to go in for that rate case so that you get the kind of the maximum bang for your buck.
And then just to kind of comment on O&M. So what we found challenging the last time when we did a rate case study is they were so focused on the previous 3-year average of our operation and maintenance cost, which were coming right out of COVID. So the amount that was requested that we knew we needed to maintain the utility was much higher than what was actually approved. And Kyle and her team has done a really good job of, again, making ends meet. So we'll go through the similar process. They'll probably look at 23, 24, 25 for 26 for a 3-year average, and then again we'll provide updates kind of as we go along.
Sure. Okay. Anything else on the water side? Okay. So switching over to the sewer side on page 9 of the presentation. So on the sewer side, we're really just going to focus in on the cash-based method for looking at the revenue requirements. So again, kind of same setup as water, where the orange bars is our annual operating and maintenance expenses. The tan bars are our principal and interest payments on outstanding debt. And then the green bars, where they do appear, are any cash-funded capital expenses that occurred in that particular year. So that purple line, again, is the revenue requirement going across the page, and the blue line is our actual user rate revenue. So really, with the exception of 2024, which was a little bit higher year from a cash-funded capital standpoint, the utility has operated from a cash position really right at its revenue requirement or slightly above it. As we go into 2025, really kind of right at or slightly above that revenue requirement. So in a good position to start talking about the future and what might be coming for new capital projects, as well as operating and maintenance expenses. And when you talk about MMSD, that's another piece of it. If you go to the next page, on page 10, and we look at the same historical financial indicators that we talked about on the water side, so our reserve level targeting 6 months of operating and maintenance expense and 1 year's worth of debt, and then our operating ratio on an annual basis, just wanting to ensure that the user rate structure is sufficient to recover 100% of your operating and maintenance expenses and your annual depreciation expense on the assets that you do have in the ground. From that reserve standpoint, your ending cash balance has historically, with the exception of 2020, really operated above the line in terms of our minimum target standpoint, which is a good thing and a positive financial signal, and also above that one-times coverage ratio of 100% of our operating expenses and our depreciation expense. So all positive indicators within the sanitary sewer utility. If you go to the next page, page 11, and we talk about the future, we've got about $6.8 million of capital need identified out through 2025. Kind of breaks down to a mixture of about $5.3 million of debt and $1.5 million roughly of cash-funded capital expenses. And then, like on the water side, there are projects that are being tracked in your capital improvement plan, but they're not part of the cash flow analysis because there are other sources of revenue to be able to pay for those projects, and those would be either projects that are developer-paid projects, impact fee supported projects, or tax increment finance district supported projects. So while they are sanitary sewer in nature, they're under other funding sources that are anticipated to be able to take care of those projects where you're not going to be relying on user rate revenues. If you go to page 12, we look at the future. Same setup from top to bottom. Our total user rate revenues are shown at the very top with the percentage increase to user rate shown just below that over time. One item just to point out for 2025. So last year in fall, we were here presenting on the sewer utility. As a result of that, you went forward with a 10% increase to user rates, and that 10% is shown in 2025. What's recommended going into 2026, and it sounds like this possibly could change if you've revised your treatment expenses with MMSD, but a 5% increase for 2026, looking at a little bit heavier increases in 2027 and 2028, and that really kind of corresponds back to the capital improvement plan and those years, as well as just assumed increases to operating and maintenance expenses, a break in 29, and then 5 to 7% increases 2030 through 2032, with the same thing kind of picking back up in 2034 and 35. Now, the sewer utility, unlike the water utility, is not regulated by the Public Service Commission. So when we talk about those rate increases on the water side, that's a very prescriptive process. You don't really have a lot of wiggle room to say, you know what, the analysis is telling us this, but we're going to try to reduce that or look at spreading that increase out over a period of years. PSC really in their framework does not allow for that to happen. On the sewer side, it's different. So, for example, we're showing the potential need of no rate increase, and I know this is out a number of years in 29 and again in 2030. Might you choose to smooth that out over time? Perhaps. And that's certainly something that you can look at in the context of your budget process. But this really is what is necessary to one, handle the projected operating and maintenance expense increases over time, two, be able to take on the debt that is associated in the capital improvement plan, as well as any cash, the cash-funded capital expenses that are occurring year over year, and three, produce net positive annual income on an annual basis.
Yeah, I guess I just want to point out, I know, like if this was me, I'd be trying to stay somewhere between 2 and 3%. and that would be kind of a sweet spot. So as I kind of mentioned, this, in my opinion, does paint a worst case situation. However, kind of piggybacking off of last year, this kind of shows how important it is to lay this out, because if you compare this to where water's at, you can see this is now a much more, while these numbers are a little higher, a much more managed kind of approach. And so what Kyla and I will continue to work on is reducing any of those impacts in those years. When we come forward with a budget for 2026, we'll adjust what the recommended rate increase is based off, if it's less than what I had that put in for some assumptions for John, we'll decrease it corresponding. So 5% would be the maximum that I would at this point in time come to Utility Commission in September and request. Additionally, kind of when we look at those two 7.5% years, the following year, and I meant to mention this in the water side. This graph also doesn't take into account increased users. So as you provide service to additional customers, that does reduce the need to increase rates. There's obviously a variable component to serving, but that does help spread the fixed cost away, again, assuming that this infrastructure would be going in the ground. Why we approach it that way is, I don't know, a recession can happen 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I want to make sure that you guys are presented with, based off of no additional development, what could this look like? Just using current consumption values, what is the revenue increase needed to cover increased costs? So again, painting worst case scenario here.
Okay.
Again, unless something terrible happened, like main breaks and other things that happen.
We
And-
don't talk about those.
If you go to page 13, you can see kind of how this comes together for the impact on an average residential bill. So on the left-hand side of the page is the water portion of the monthly utility bill. The middle part of the page is the monthly portion of the sewer utility bill, and then showing the annual bill for combined water and sewer over time. So the analysis is based on the assumption that the average user is using 3,250 gallons per month. You can see in 2026 on the water side, if you instituted a 22.5% increase, that change would result in a $9.84 increase to the monthly utility bill. So going from $43.73 per month currently to $53.57. And you can see it going out over time. The next rate increase in 28, in 2030, in 2032 and 34. On the sanitary sewer side, that 5% increase would result in a $2.45 increase year over year on a monthly basis, $3.86 next year for the 7.5%, and you can see it kind of going on down throughout the page here. Going to the next page in terms of just recommendations and just wrap up for both water and sewer. Kind of the takeaways is, I think, thinking about starting when your next conventional case is going to be. It's started as soon as spring of 2026, but to Cameron's point, as we're walking through this, you really want to time the rate case around when those assets are actually going to get booked into service. So if it's thinking that, those projects are going to start in 26, roll into 2027, perhaps we're not starting the rate case until summer, really about this time next year. The turnover in test years is the end of July for Public Service Commission. On the capital side, utilizing a mixture of general obligation debt and cash on hand to fund the 10-year capital improvement plan. And then looking at, a series of conventional cases over the next several year period of time as deemed appropriate based on, again, when those capital improvements are actually going to hit and get put into service. Next page. On the sewer side, consider a 5% increase. It says for 2025, should be 2026. And then on the capital side, utilizing a mixture of general obligation debt and cash. General obligation debt for the larger capital improvement projects identified in the 10-year plan, cash for fleet purchases and other more minor capital improvement projects, as well as just spend down where reserves do start to build, as long as you're keeping above that minimum benchmark standard. And obviously, the healthier the reserves, the better the utility is looked at from an investment standpoint for those who might be purchasing your debt out into the future. And then stay on top of those annual rate increases. Something like this, again, is very proactive in nature and allows you to really be able to assess over the long haul what the utility might be. But one of the things to kind of hit home on is there is a compounding effect to those rate increases. So doing nothing and not keeping up with an analysis like this and then coming back 4 or 5 years later is going to likely result in a larger one-time increase. And from a bill standpoint, most people obviously budget month to month. So having some stability in those increases and try to keeping them as linear as possible, to Cameron's point about just what you try to do to keep things smooth over time is appreciated, I think, from the customer standpoint. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
I just have one on your sewer future long-range cash flow analysis.
Yeah.
In 2033, there's a negative 561,000.
Yep. Yeah, that's because if you look towards the bottom of the page, there's 718,850 that was identified in for that year. So it's a planned use of cash for larger capital improvement projects for that particular year.
Yeah, and that raises a good point. As we're starting to have to replace mains, I want to get, to the extent possible, away from having to debt finance every utility project. Again, because there will eventually have some compounding issues with interest, and then we don't want the interest payments on our debt service to be driving what the increases on our rates are. Because of some conservativeness in the sewer and water rate increases in the past, and as the graphs that John showed, we just didn't have the cash on hand to fund large scale projects. And we're getting there as we're building up these reserves. We're starting to now kind of be more aggressive on financing projects with cash. And so that will, again, continue to have positive impacts on rates going forward.
So, and the other question I had, sorry, my apologies. And the other question I had is, how do we smooth out the water?
Yeah, the water is tougher because of the regulatory environment that you live in. The water is really driven by the capital improvement projects and the timing of those capital improvement projects in terms of those rate increases. So there is not as great of an ability to smooth those increases out. The one way to do it would be to increase the frequency in which you're going to go in for conventional rate cases. And I don't know that you really, that's possible beyond what we're showing here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I wish I had a better answer for you.
Yeah, me too.
I think I'll answer kind of just bluntly. In a normal kind of cycle, I wouldn't do 2 major projects in a year. I wouldn't recommend that in the future, just with kind of a capacity and general need. Well 2 and this looping was the same year, and that's, again, a vast majority of why this increase is in there. We really need to be proactive, again, doing this proactively, making sure that we're not having major investments in the same year.
Okay.
So what I'm looking for today, so 2 things. So on the water side, just general direction that, continue to work with Allers on pulling a water rate study for next year. And then for sewer, when I approached John about the study, one of the things that I had concerns with is it's been probably a little over a decade since we've looked at how our sewer rates are billed from a fixed and variable rate perspective. And so when we've been applying increases, it's been a flat increase based on both the fixed and variable. So I would like direction to move to the second phase of the sewer rate, just to make sure that we're appropriately charging our customers from a fixed and variable perspective.
Anybody? I don't see a problem with that. If it more accurately depicts what we should be charging them, then we should probably do.
And why we can't set, and what this will, and I asked John when he comes back, when we have that report, while we can't put it on the physical utility bill, that report will show how much of our bill it pertains to MMSD. So it will break kind of a MMSD variable and fixed portion of that bill. So that will be kind of a good benchmark for us to kind of keep an eye on how much of that bill is really made up of that portion.
Okay. So do we need a motion or just the consensus here to let you move forward on this?
So that would be the staff direction. The discuss and consider would be if there's any changes from a capital perspective on here, that's where there could be some discussion here. If you guys are okay with the way that this is laid out, which is kind of consistent with the utility master plan, then I would just recommend to discuss an approval of the plan as presented with staff direction.
So, but you need a motion on that?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion or questions for Cameron? No. Okay, so, I don't know exactly how to word this, but, I'll make a motion to, again, my apologies. So I'll make a motion to allow Cameron to move forward with the budget as he suggested. Is that too vague? Mike?
I would recommend a motion to be, to approve the long-range cash flow analysis as presented with staff direction.
Perfect wording. Mike?
That's a motion I'll second.
Okay. I appreciate it. Don't really know how to word it, so. So any other discussion before we, okay, so all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And no one abstaining. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your evening, and
Yep.
we'll be back with the sewer rate recommendations. We'll also be back in front of you on the water and sewer impact fees this fall. So those are the one-time impact fees that it's payable by new development at the issuance of the building permit, which will also help the water and sewer utilities over time.
So how about instead of worst case, come back with best case?
Best
Okay.
case, there we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
for
Take
your-
care.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, so that was A. So on new business, discuss and consider the zero lot line application for 101 and 103 East School Road.
Yeah, so there's two zero lot line applications in the packet today for 101 and 103, and then 105 and 107. Both of these, the zero line lot application in the CSM was never recorded back in 2013 when the buildings were created, so they're going through that official process now. Water is separated, sewer from all records is separated as well, and based on the CSM, that has been provided for both. The only caveat that I would make is to have the applicant verify the sewer location. There's a sanitary sewer easement behind their properties, and the way the CSM is being shown, the sewer is served from the street, which is, in my mind, pretty impossible because the sewer is from behind their homes. So that would be my only recommendation, is that they confirm that the sewer is being fed off the back of their lot and not the front of their lot.
It's a pretty good recommendation.
Probably should be right on the CSM.
Okay. So, need a motion for that, or just advice to consider it, or move forward with it?
Yes, I need a motion for approval with staff direction, and I'll work with Aaron because this is going on the Plan Commission tonight, that they need to verify the location of the sanitary sewer.
Okay, a motion, did you get that? Okay, perfect. Can you read it, please?
Yep, approval of the zero lot line application for 101-103 East School Road with staff direction.
Perfect. Okay, we made that motion, so can I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And no abstaining. Thank you. And now C would be discuss and consider zero lot line application for 105, 107 East School Road. Same thing?
Same thing.
Okay, a motion.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, I'll make a motion to approve the zero lot line for 105 to 107 East School Road with staff direction for the sanitary verification.
Perfect. And I'll second it. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And no one abstaining. Thank you. So I guess that we can go down to number 8, the engineer's report.
Strand provided the report in the packet. Some quick highlights on that. The lift station at West Lawn should be wrapping up here shortly. Heyday Cottage Grove at the corner of Bus and Cottage Grove Road is going to be starting here very shortly. They have their approvals in. And then we've talked about the Coyle Highland South and the Farms development recently here. So those are continuing to move forward. I have exciting news on our SCADA upgrades project. We are almost wrapping up with that. LW Allen and Pieper Construction, who was the contractor for us, we're working together on all of our sites, and as of today, almost all of our frequencies that were on this one radio have been switched over to a higher frequency, so everything's communicating much faster. So as of right now, everything's looking really good, so staff is really excited about that. Well 2 rehab is still being through design. Some more information will be forthcoming as they continue to move forward. The application is now being looked at by the PSC. I got notification of that today. And then the County Highway TT water main looping is moving forward as well. Strand is moving forward with an alignment on where that water main is going to go. Moving forward on that, it's just going to be a looping project, and we're not going to be looking at a path on top of the water main. The constraints of it, working with Dane County Highway and Dane County Parks, it was going to be over $1 million project. That wasn't a high priority as it wasn't located within the village either. So that's what I got on the engineer's report. If there's any questions for me.
Any questions for Strand and Kayla? Okay, so we'll go to director's report, please, number 9.
As I mentioned, the Water Tower 3 lease last month was signed by the village. It's been executed on Verizon's side. I am waiting for a status update on when they will actually be starting construction on that. We're moving through all of our water valve exercising throughout the village and getting as much as those done as we can with other tasks that we're working through. We are going to be doing a deep clean of the Vilas lift station. So we're going to be having expediters come in, and with the Vilas lift station, there's 2 sides of the wet well, so we're able to turn one side of the wet well off and keep the other one running. So Vilas will continue to be operable. We'll just clean one side at a time. From my utility superintendent, Dave, he does not know the last time if that lift station has ever been deep cleaned. So we're pretty excited to see how that looks after it's done. We've cleaned it ourselves as best as we could, but we've never drained the entire wet well. The other thing that is going to be looked at for budget season that you'll see coming through here in September, and that was in our long-range cash flow analysis, is starting to put cameras at our wells. So with well 2 rehab, we'll have cameras installed, planned to be installed both outside and inside of the building, and then we'll also look to install those at well 3 and 4 as well. As we then continue over the next several years, the towers will eventually have cameras ideally, as well as the lift stations. Obviously the wells are kind of the most important infrastructure that we have as a community. Something happens to the water, not good for anybody. So kind of first line of defense there.
And key fob entry also.
Yep, and key fob entry. So right now it's all based on key. So then it'll be a key fob, so if we needed to know who was coming in and out, I'd be able to check that.
And the thing that I want to point out is that these will all be hooked into the village system. So that the police will have access.
Yep.
So I think that's a wonderful upgrade, and we're doing due diligence to protect our systems as best we can.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate that very much. Any other questions for her? Okay, future agenda items, any? Other than the budget?
Budget time in September, so you'll see the budget come through for review and approval for both sewer and water.
So we gonna extend the,
I haven't gotten
Other
that far
meeting?
yet. Public Works meeting?
yeah,
Let me talk once I have the budget kind of finalized with Cam, I'll talk and I'll be in touch if we need to shift meetings one way or the other.
because hopefully it won't take more than what we did tonight.
I hope not either.
Oh, good, excellent.
No, and that's part of the reason why we kind of had this, there's not gonna be anything new in front of the team. It's gonna be, these are the projects that are on the plan, this is the effect. And we're gonna keep it more kind of high level. There shouldn't be any surprises.
Okay, again, appreciate you guys. Number 11, can I have a motion for adjournment, please?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you, everybody.
I stole this pen. So really, if you don't like him, just let me know, okay?
I'm sure they're
I
gonna
hope
be,
you do.
I'm sure they're gonna be fabulous. Thank you very much.
You betcha.